Usually the technique videos come after swatching, but since we will be swatching chart number 1, I need to talk through some basics. So stick with me. We're going to talk chart reading. We're going to talk slip stitch knitting basics for Western, Eastern, and combination. And we're going to talk a little bit about things that you want to be aware of when working your chart. And then what I'll do is edit the sections of videos where I'm actually teaching this technique so that you'll be able to swatch. Don't worry, when you cast on for your cowl, those videos will still be there. I'm just going to put together the information you need to do this swatch. Now, if you're a new knitter and you're new to working slip stitch, I would suggest casting on with some scrap yarn and just practicing these techniques. Then, when you're comfortable working chart number 1, you can cast on and do your gauge swatch. Now, when it comes time to work this fun, handy-dandy, unvented, this is my little invention that I don't think anyone else has created yet, which is a contrasting color I-cord cast on, where the first row is a different color than the I-cord, something you normally can't do. Again, cast on with contrasting color, and with scrap yarn, and get used to it. Okay, let's talk chart reading. So I've already received so many messages saying, oh, I hate charts, I want to use words. Trust me, you will not use the words. The chart is a picture of your knitting. With words, you can't tell if things are stacking up correctly, if the dark twisted stitch is right in the middle. You're not going to be able to tell that with words. Words are useless when it comes to color work. Notice, here's the chart for this guy right here. And it is a picture of your knitting. So really try the charts. Trust me, trust me, trust me. You will not want to use the words. All right, so let's look at some chart reading basics. If you're new, stick with me. But if you've been around the block, still stick with me, because what I found out on the cruise when we debuted this little pattern is that there were knitters that were still making a mistake using this chart, experienced knitters, but you know, sometimes you just get in the rhythm and you forget something, and that will not work in the round. So stick with me. Okay. First thing we want to look at is all the chart basics. I'm just going to zoom in a little close. The first thing we want to know about a chart is every line is a round, in this case, because we're working in the round, and every box is a stitch. Because we're working in the round, you don't even have to think that much about the chart, unlike working flat, because every round is read right to left, and you're always looking at the public side of your work in knitting, and you're always looking at the public side of your chart. Over here we have the chart symbols. So for instance, the white boxes are going to be color A, which the first time you work it is going to be your number 2 color. And the second time we work the chart through is going to be your number 1 color. The dark color in the pattern is listed as color B. And the first time we work it is color 5, and the second time we work it is color 4. So that might sound confusing, A, B, 1, 2, 3, 4. But it's because it's a 2-color chart, color A, color B. And that's how it's always written. But we work it twice. So one time we work it is with the combinations of the color 2 and 5. And the second time we work it, it's the combination of colors 1 and 4. Make sense? So don't worry, there's a video on swatching and talking about the colors, and if you're in a gradient pack, the colors are simply 1 through 5 in order of light to dark. If you're in a non-gradient pack, then I advise that you look at how the colors are paired and decide what you like the look of. Okay, but back to chart reading. Let's take a look at some more things we need to know. So, these symbols over here. ironically, they look like what the stitch is. So this little twist right here stands for knit through the back loop, KTBL. This V means slip. Don't worry, we're going to talk about slip stitch knitting basics. This is slip with yarn in front because there's going to be a float going across the front. This is our little lifted stitch, and we're going to look at that as well. And this box right here is the repeat. So rows 1 and 2 we do once, and then this box is the row repeat. So you'll see when we work the pattern, you're going to work round 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10. 3, 4, 5, 6, 7, 8, 9, 10, and then you'll work 11 through 18. This whole chart is the stitch repeat, and this is where some folks that took the class, this pattern debuted on the Nautical Knitting Cruise, went a little bit of awry. So when we get to round 5, it's very important that you don't just get in this rhythm of lift, slip 5 with yarn in front, because you'll notice that these first 2 stitches are slip with yarn in back. Then we lift, slip 5 with yarn in front, lift, slip 2 with yarn in back, and we go back to the beginning of the repeat. That's how a stitch repeat works. We work stitch 1 through 12 and back here again. Now, some knitters on the cruise were like, oh, well, but I like the look of just slipping these guys again. But because this is in the round and you're going to end up coming back to the beginning, you're not going to be able to do that. So that's why this design works the way it does, where you have these little diamonds and then you have this little V. So this is what the stitch looks like. Okay, now I just want to show you one other tip as far as really making the chart look like this knitting. This is the lifted symbol. This is slip with yarn in front. So what you're going to have for a while is those 2 rounds, round 1 and 2. It's going to have a long piece of yarn going across the whole front of it. But you're going to see in the video of this lifted float, if you want to draw on your chart that V, because that's what it's going to look like. That's what it looks like when it's lifted. So I just want to show you how you're going to start seeing like, oh, I get it. It's literally a picture of my knitting. So see those little lifts? And then the staggers. See what's happening here? There's that lift, right? Drink, drink. And then it staggers, drink, drink. So, chart reading. Every line is a row, every box is a stitch. The repeat, you work these stitches, and then you'll go back to these stitches. One more thing about charts that I wanted to tell you is chart markers. Any way you slice it, they're really handy, but really important in any chart. This is the little magnet, right, where you can clip it right to the paper. This is a wonderful little sticky. Any marker you use, you need to put the marker above the row you're working. So this is me working row 1 or round 1. This is me working round 2. So do not put it below, but you want to put it above because I want to see how the stitches are stacking up. So if I put that marker above this row and I notice, uh-oh, that slipped, that twisted stitch isn't lined up with this other twisted stitch, or that lifted one isn't in the middle of these 5, then I know something's gone wrong. If I had it below, I wouldn't know that. Just like I wouldn't know it if I was using the words. Charts rule, baby. Now, one important thing about slip stitch knitting is the direction we slip our stitch. So before I look at the chart, let's just look at that concept. So stitches are mounted with the leading leg in the front if you are a Western knitter. If you're an Eastern knitter, your stitches sit with the leading leg in the back for both the knit and the purl. Sometimes combination knitters don't know their combination, and your stitch sits like this for the purl and this for the knit. Combination knitters often discover their combination knitter the first time they work in the round, because when a combination knitter knits, they put their needle in the back, they wrap the yarn under, and then the next row, that stitch sits like this, and they put the needle in the front, and they wrap the yarn under. If you're a combination knitter and you didn't know it, then make sure to look at my video on combination knitting on YouTube. I also have a class on that. You can email me at info@pattylyons.com. I'll put a little note down there. But what's important to know about slip stitch knitting is we have to slip the stitch without changing its stitch mount. So what that means in Western knitting is it's referred to as slip as if to purl. The reason we do that is it moves from one needle to the other with no change in its stitch mount. Because the next time we come to it, at the end of the round, we come all the way around again. There it is, it's sitting there. And if we have to knit it or purl it, we're not going to twist it. If we slip it as if to knit, and we turn the stitch mount around, and the next time we come to it, we ignore its stitch mount and knit the way we've memorized to knit if we're a Western knitter, we will twist our stitch. If you're an Eastern knitter, instead of thinking slip as if to knit, slip as if to purl, think about it as slip as if to maintain the way I want to work it on the next round. So if you're an Eastern knitter, you're also moving it tip to tip with no change in its stitch mount. Because the next time you come to that stitch in the round, that stitch will be mounted the way you want it if you're an Eastern knitter, and that's the way you knit. So remember, any way you slice it in slip stitch knitting, be aware of where the hole is and put the needle in the hole to knit or purl the next stitch. So if accidentally you slipped as if to knit and you came to that stitch next time and had to knit it or purl it, no big deal, you will knit it or purl it. All right, so let's take a look at what this chart means, because we've gone over chart basics, and that's chart basics are the same for cables, lace, ferrule. Every line is a row, every box is a stitch, row repeat, stitch repeat. But now we have something that is unique to slip stitch knitting chart reading. And that is, what color am I working? So whatever color is the first box, whatever color is the first box, that's the color you're working. That's the color you pick up in your hand. And you'll notice that what happens is the chart is a picture of that row finished, that round finished. So notice the first color is the dark one, right? So that's going to be my color 5. And remember that you're always going to have the other color on your needle. Either the other color will be on your needle because of the setup row beforehand, like these purl ridges, right? Or the color will be on your needle because of the cast on. So right here, the lighter color is on my needle from the cast on. So notice I just look at that first box and I go, okay, that's dark. And notice that the act of course, knitting it, and here I'm knitting it through the back loop, so that's my twisted stitch, changes the color to dark, just like the chart. And then the act of slipping the next 5 with yarn in front, 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Don't worry, next up I'm going to edit together the technique videos nice and slow. Those stitches stay light. So that's all I wanted to show you, is that concept. And there I knit the next stitch, and that color changes colors, of why a chart is vastly superior to words. Because here I can glance down and say, okay, I should have a dark, 5 lights, and a dark. I have a dark, 5 lights, and a dark. There should be a float going across all of them. See those dots? Okay, there's the float. So at a glance, I can see that I am on track. If I had words, I would not know that. That's a bummer. So I give a big fat thumbs down to the words. So all you have to remember is it's very WYSIWYG. It's a little computer term, meaning what you see is what you get. So you are literally doing exactly each box on your needle, and then each box is going to look like what's on your needle. Pretty easy, right? So don't forget, at the end of this, so here I've finished 2, 4, 6, 8, 10, 12 stitches right there. That's 1 repeat. And notice after that, I go back to the beginning. So round 1 and round 2, I'm working with the dark color and I'm slipping the light color. Round 3 and 4, I'm just knitting with the light color. So whatever the first box is, that's the color you work. Okay, so that's all there is to know about chart reading. So I'm going to edit together the techniques for chart number 1 next, so that you'll know how to swatch, and then watch the speed swatch video to know the little tricks of how to make a swatch flat that will give you the gauge for in the round. So I'm going to start working across, and I have my knit through the back loop, and then I slip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5 with the yarn in front. Now, the important thing with these floats is you want to leave those 5 stitches spread out. So what I do is I hang on to them as I knit the next stitch through the back loop. And I repeat. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Leave it spread out. You don't want that to be too bunched up as you knit the next stitch through the back loop. So I'll show you that for throwing as well. Obviously, when we slip, don't forget, for slip stitch knitting, we need to slip as if to purl. Otherwise, we'll reverse our stitch mounts. 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. And when I bring that yarn to the back to knit through the back loop, I just want to make sure that I'm not, whoops, I got 2 stitches there, that I'm not strangling those 5 too much. So I'm going to go ahead and do my whole setup round. And this is the only time I do this particular setup round. And I'll do that 2 whole rounds. And I'm going to work 1 full repeat of the chart, and then I'll work 1 all together. So here I'm working a row that's identical to the 2 setup rows that you're about to start with, except it also has the lift. So since the first part is easy, just knitting through the back loop, moving the yarn to the front and slipping 1, 2, 3, 4, 5. Now, of course, when we slip as if to purl, meaning we're inserting the needle tip to tip. And the other thing I want to show you is when that float goes across the front, you want to leave it loose. So you don't want to tighten down too much. Otherwise your piece is going to be puckered. So leave it nice and loose. So if you were on the setup row, you would just go into another twisted stitch. But I want to show you the lift, since once you finish the setup rows, you have lifts all the way across. So there are the two floats that are going across the front of my work from the previous rows. And I need to take my needle and grab under both of them. So it's important that you don't accidentally catch some of the other color. So sometimes what I do is I just kind of put them over my nail, and then I'll slide the needle on under. And then I have to knit the stitch and pull it down under both floats and off, and it will look like that. So I'm going to repeat that. I slip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I have my twisted stitch. So that part's the same as your setup. And I know everything is right with the world, of course, because my twisted stitch is stacking up right on top of my other twisted stitches. And I know everything's right with the world when I slip 1, 2, 3, 4, 5, and I'm ready to lift, and it's in the middle of the previous 5. So I can see there's my twisted stitch 2, and there's my middle stitch. So let's just look at that again. Actually, let's look at that for throwing. Not that it's any different, but you know how I like to share the love. So you're going to dig under both the floats, enter the stitch, knit, and make sure to dig that stitch down under both floats. And then don't forget, yoink, you still have to exit, right? So don't forget that step. And that's what makes this lifted float pattern. And we have a setup row, and then we have 2 repeats, and then we have some rows that will end it, because of course when we end it, we need to not carry the floats across the front, just the way we did when we started it.